Hi guys, hope you're doing well today. Chapter 8, Cards. After making his morning rounds with the clocks, Hugo showed up at the toy booth the next day prepared to work. He could feel the cogs and wheels in his head spinning in different directions. One moment he felt hopeful that he'd get his notebook back. The next he felt angry and resentful. But he did his work. He swept the floor and organized the small boxes behind the counter. He untangled the wires of the flapping birds and repainted the chipped toys. He fixed the mechanical creatures that had stopped working. Hugo found himself surrounded by more mechanical parts than he ever could have imagined. Everywhere he looked, there were buckets of loose metal bits, tiny motors, gears, springs, nuts, bolts, and brightly colored tin. Hugo knew he shouldn't steal anything else, but looking at all these pieces was just too tempting. If he did get his notebook back, he would need more parts. He rubbed the buttons on his jacket and deftly pocketed the tiny mechanisms that he wanted. While Hugo worked, the old man played cards. Hugo's father had taught him how to play solitaire, and he used to entertain Hugo with a few card tricks. Hugo hadn't thought about that in a long time. As he watched the old man play, he saw things that captivated him. The old man didn't shuffle the deck. He fanned it and flipped it and made the cards jump into an arcing bridge, shooting them in rapid succession from one hand to the other. He could cut the deck with one hand and make a second fan of cards appear behind the first. He could even make a card float up by itself and then lower it into the deck again. How could such a mean old man do such amazing things? The next time Hugo came to work, he brought his own deck of cards. After he had nearly finished his chores, he boldly went over to the old man and set it down. "Show me how you did that with the cards." "How I do what? Play solitaire?" "How you make the cards fan out like that and float." "Was I doing that?" the old man asked. "I wasn't paying attention. Now go to work before I lose my patience." Hugo didn't move. The old man hesitated. He squinted at the boy with one eye, then picked up his cards and fanned them out in his hand again. He made them dance and rise and float. Hugo stood, staring in delight, until the old man's voice shook him out of his trance. "Enough! Go to work." But throughout the day, Hugo stole glances at the old man, who continued to do amazing things with the cards. Sometimes Hugo caught his eye and got the distinct impression that the old man wanted him to see what he was doing, as though the old man was performing for him. Eventually, the old man fell asleep again, and Hugo felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned and saw the girl with a bright red book under one arm. She put a finger to her lips. "Meet me at the bookstore in 10 minutes, she whispered. "Papa George's doesn't want me here." Then she slipped behind the benches and columns and disappeared down the hallway. "I started looking for your notebook," the girl said when Hugo appeared. "You better not look inside." If I find it, I should at least be able to look at it." "Then don't look for it." Hugo glared at her. "I'm trying to help you. Why are you being so mean?" Hugo blinked. He had never thought of himself as mean before. The old man was mean, not him. Hugo had no choice. He had to keep secrets, but he couldn't explain this to the girl. She was standing there with her hands on her hips, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite place. She looked very grown up, like she was disappointed in him, and for a brief moment, quite unexpectedly, his heart sank. Hugo looked away from her and put his hands in his pockets. "Just promise me you won't open it," he said. "Fine." She sounded angry, but then she added, "If it falls open and I have to pick it up, I'm not going to close my eyes." That's when the bell above the door jangled and a young man entered. "Etienne," the girl said. "Hello, Isabelle," the young man said. So her name was Isabelle, thought Hugo. "I haven't seen you in a while. How are things at the toy booth?" "Fine," said Isabelle. She motioned toward Hugo and said, "This is my friend, Hugo." Etienne smiled and shook Hugo's hand. "Etienne works at the movie theater near my home. He sneaks me in because Papa George's won't allow me to see any movies. I always take pity on people who love movies. I can't help it. Do you like movies, Hugo?" My father always took me to the movies for my birthday, he answered. What did you see? Asked Isabel. Hugo looked at both of them. He thought about the times he had gone to the movies with father and how much they loved being together in the darkness of the cinema. Finally, Hugo answered Isabel's question. My last birthday, we saw a movie with a man hanging from the arms of a giant clock. Oh, that's a good one. It's called Safety Last, said Hugo. Sorry. Oh, that's a good one. It's called Safety Last, said Isabel, starring Harold Lloyd. You think this is one of those old-fashioned black and white movies that probably didn't have sound. I'm leaving town for a few days to visit my family, said Etienne, but come by the movie theater next week when I'm back. I'll be working on Tuesday. I'll sneak you both in. I can't, said Hugo. You must, said Etienne, smiling. Promise you'll come. I can't do that. Come on, Hugo, promise, Isabel said. The idea of going to the movies made Hugo remember something father had once told him about going to the movies when he was just a boy, when the movies were new. Hugo's father had stepped into a dark room, and on a white screen he had seen a rocket fly right into the eye of the man in the moon. Father said he had never experienced anything like it. It had been like seeing his dreams in the middle of the day. All right, I promise, said Hugo. Isabel tucked her new book, Greek Mythology, under her arm and said, Good, I'll see you then. I've got to go now. There's something I have to look for. Don't open the notebook, said Hugo, but Isabel was already headed toward the door. Goodbye, Etienne, she called, and then to Hugo she said, I'll see you next week at the theater, and she disappeared into the crowded train station. Etienne said, Well, it was nice to meet you, Hugo, and he wandered off to find the book he had come in looking for. Hugo headed toward the door to leave, but the bookstore was warm and quiet, and the teetering pile of books fascinated him. He decided to take a look around for just a minute. Hugo held the book that had caught his eye. There were golden cards embossed on the cover, as well as the title, Practical Manual of Card Magic and Illusions. Inside, clear black and white diagrams revealed what seemed like an endless array of card tricks, many of which Hugo had seen the old man do. The second half of the book showed the secrets of how to make things disappear and how to throw your voice and pull rabbits from hats. More diagrams showed how to tear paper and have it reassemble itself, how to pour water into a shoe and leave the shoe dry. Hugo continued flipping through the book, seeing if there was anything at all about automata. But the book was silent on the subject. Still, Hugo wanted it very much. He knew that Monsieur Labisse lent books to Isabel, but Hugo didn't just want to borrow this one. He wanted to own it. He slipped it under his arm and itched toward the door. He rubbed the remaining buttons on his jacket. Hey, Hugo, called Etienne, who was sitting at a stool reading. What do you have there? Hugo grew agitated. He wanted to run, but Etienne approached him and took the book from under his arm. Magic. Etienne smiled and handed him back the book. Do you know what's under my eye patch? Was Hugo really supposed to answer that question? It seemed that Etienne was waiting for an answer. Hesitantly, Hugo said, Your eye? No, I lost my eye when I was a kid playing with fireworks. A Portuguese rocket flew into it. Hugo thought about his father's favorite movie and wondered briefly if the man in the moon had to wear an eye patch after the rocket flew into his eye. But all Hugo could think to say was, Oh. So do you want to know what's under my eye patch then? Okay, Hugo said, thinking that what he really wanted to do was get out of there. Etienne reached beneath the eye patch and pulled out a coin, which he handed to Hugo. That's the only magic trick I know, said Etienne. Go buy the book.